Hey BookTube, sorry I didn't see you there. I was just doing a bit of light fiction reading, taking a break from my non-fiction November TBR. While I've got you though, we may as well have a go at doing my 5-star prediction video. For those of you that don't know, it's not officially a tag, but it has been kind of masquerading as one around BookTube over the past few months. The original video was put up by Mercedes on the channel Mercy's Bookish Musings, and I will drop a link in the description field for you guys to check that out. But I've seen a number of people have a go at this in my subscription feed, so I thought, why not myself? But before we get into that, I wanted to appraise you guys of 3 improvements that we're looking to make here on the channel. We're always, me and my production team here and on the stoop are always looking to improve the video content that we put up on the channel. And after an exhaustive review of the last video that I put up, my non-fiction November TBR, if you haven't already seen it, go and wade through all 18 minutes of it please, and it will give you some context for these improvements. So after a review of that, we have identified 3 areas of improvement, and the first one I've already mastered for this video: black t-shirt. If you go and watch that video, you will see that I'm wearing a white t-shirt or cream coloured t-shirt. This is problematic for a number of reasons. Firstly, my naturally pallid complexion. Secondly, this background throw is also in cream coloured, light coloured, and the wall behind is also in magnolia. So wearing a white t-shirt, what I've discovered is it makes me look completely ghostly. In fact, in that video I look like a big floating man-child head with my head in the middle. It's not a good look. So in the future we are going for black t-shirts or dark coloured t-shirts. Improvement number 2. In that video, especially towards the end of my November non-fiction TBR, an awful lot of umming and ahhing creeps in. Now I know some of you more professional people edit all that out post-production. I don't have a lot of time or patience for doing that, so you're going to have to put up with the ums and ahs being left in. However, what I'm going to do is introduce the equivalent of a channel swear box. So for every inadvertent or ah that makes it through, drop 50p in there, donate it to charity. It's a win-win situation. Either some charity of my choosing will get a payoff, or I'll get more disciplined and all the ums and ahs will finally be ironed out without the need for post-production editing. Fingers crossed. But now I've made you aware of that, obviously you will be looking for those, but I plan on, the reason for doing that is at least you guys will keep me honest and let me know whether I'm improving in that area. Third and final improvement has to do with my furtive looking around like this. I noticed my eyes kind of gaze all over the place. I've not mastered, as so many of the better booktubers have, that kind of middle distance stare. You know, that one that they do when they're talking about a book and they pause and they look off into the distance pensively, thinking about what they're going to say next. Not mastered that. So I'm going to need some help from you guys, some style tips maybe of how people achieve that middle distance stare. Those are the 3 areas of improvement. I've already wasted 3.5 minutes, so let's get into the 5-star predictions, shall we? If you don't know what this is, it's very simple. You go and take a look at your TBR and you pick out a selection of books that you predict are going to be 5-star reads for you. If you're not a fan of strict marking systems, I know not everybody is, given the subjective nature of reviewing books, then I guess another way of looking at this would be books that you feel are going to be amongst your top of the year, top reads of the year. It's an interesting idea because I think it forces you to think about what influences you to make one book a 5-star read as opposed to another. So is it things like, from what you can read in the synopsis, the kind of setting or plot or characters? Is it more superficial things, like as one of your favourite authors blurbed the cover? Is it the cover itself? Is it set near to you? Or is there some intangible thing around the setting that just ticks certain boxes for you? Or to what extent do the opinions of others influence you? So have you seen it on BookTube? Have you read the Goodreads reviews? And have you read any other reviews in the press? So to what extent do the opinions of others influence you? So I think it's quite interesting to try and unpack the reasons that you give a book a 5-star rating rather. I've given myself two constraints. Firstly, these are books that I must be picking up in the next few months. I think if you're going to do this, the entire point is you do this video and then you come back in a few months' time and you say how well you did or how badly you did, if Mercedes' first attempt at this is anything to go by. So that's the first constraint. Second constraint, I will not be including any books that are part of a series where I've already read one or more of that series, because I think you already know the plot, characters, setting. It feels a little bit unfair to pick out books from that as a 5-star. It feels a bit like cheating, in fact. Those are the two constraints. That's not to say that I cannot pick up a book for an author that I've read before, just not one of that's part of a series. And in fact, the first book that I've picked as my 5-star read is just such an example. It's Burial Rites by Hannah Kent. And I read Hannah Kent's second book last month. This is a debut novel. The second book is called The Good People. And although you can tell, I mean, Hannah Kent can certainly write, she certainly captures a sense of place. And I think she gave quite a interesting look at the mixture of Christian and pre-Christian beliefs in Ireland in that book, The Good People. But to me, the plot kind of meandered midway through. But the reason I'm still giving this as a 5-star read is in the book club discussions for The Good People, the people in the book club that were most disappointed with The Good People were the ones who'd read this, and that was because they said this was a much better book. If you don't know what this is about, it is historical fiction, although it is based on a true historical event, another plus point for me. And it is about a woman in 19th century Iceland who goes through a trial and is sentenced for the murder of her partner, and it is about her relationship during the trial and the sentencing and so on with both the local priest and the family that she's lodging with at that time. It just sounds like a dark, kind of compelling book, and as I say, I've heard good things from people at the book group and good things from people on BookTube about this book. So most notably, recently at least, James Chatham, I noticed, picked this up for the Autumn Readathon and gave it rave reviews. So I'm trusting people on here that this is going to, and in my book group, that this is going to be a great read. And as I say, I love historical fiction anyway, so it ticks a few boxes for me, that one. Second book is another one that's been getting an awful lot of buzz here on BookTube, and not least because it was, in fact wholly because I think it was shortlisted for the Man Booker Prize. Probably many of us would not have been aware of its existence had it not been, and that is Elmet by Fiona Mozley, or Mozley. This is about two siblings, Daniel and Caroline, who live with their father, who makes his living through bare knuckle fighting, and it is about their life, a kind of marginal existence in a self-built kind of homestead, which is built on land that doesn't belong to them. So the reason I think I will like this, not least because so many people on BookTube that I trust and enjoy watching have given it a good review. It seems like as well that it has got sort of a good sort of sense of place. Strangely, the title Elmet was a pre-Saxon British Celtic kind of kingdom, and it is not all that far from where I live. The modern day villages of Sherburn in Elmet and Barwick in Elmet are about 10 minutes away from me in the car, sort of between Leeds and York, which is where Fiona Mozley's from. So I'm kind of intrigued to see whether the title has been picked for a specific reason. I've also been told that it is a story that's kind of got a simmering tension which slowly builds and builds and builds and then kind of erupts at the end, and I like that kind of setup where you can feel the kind of tension bubbling below the surface. So I think, and also the fact that it touches on issues of land ownership in a country where we're struggling every year after year to build enough housing, and we have so many issues with our current kind of housing stock is an interesting take as well. So I'm looking forward to reading about that and the degree to which it's a political novel in some ways. That's the second choice. The third choice is a bit more of a risk. I've not heard much about this on BookTube. In fact, I've only heard Dave over at Wild Reads mention this book. I think he mentioned it in his October wrap-up. If I can find the link to that, I will link it in the description field below. And it's a book that, you know, those things where I was talking about earlier, about those characteristics of a book where it just ticks certain boxes for you and you can't explain why you think necessarily those are things that are, those characteristics are attractive. Well, this is one of those. It's The Vanishing of Audrey Wilde by Eve Chase, another relatively recent release. So this is set on two timelines. There's a modern day timeline and there's a timeline set in the 1950s. The thing that ties them together is a place called Applecote Manor, and it's kind of like a stately home. So that is one of the things. That's a tick in the box for me. Don't know why, but I love kind of stories, particularly like this one, that have a secret or dark secret at the heart of it, that are set in stately homes. I also like books that kind of have a split timeline, particularly when they're done well and that kind of ties it together right at the end. One of my favourite books, Atonement by Ian McEwan, has a very similar setup to this. It's set in a stately home, or the initial part of it is. It starts with a secret, and it then has a timeline in the future which kind of looks back and ties it together. So that's why I think it's going to be a suspenseful read. Obviously it's about a disappearance in the 1950 storyline. It's about a disappearance of the aforementioned Audrey Wilde, and I just think it's going to be a suspenseful read. And as I say, it's got some of those it's kind of strange characteristics, but stately home, double timeline with a narrative in the future and one, in the present and one in the past. So yeah, looking forward to getting to that one. It's a bit more of a risk though, because I've not seen as many reviews on that. So my penultimate selection is another relatively recent release, and that is Madness is Better Than Defeat, and it's by Ned Beauman. The reason I've picked this one, I read Ned Beauman's second book. I think this is his fourth. It's the only Ned Beauman book I've read, called The Teleportation Accident. I think I gave it 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed it, but it was a kind of bizarre romp with these different storylines that don't seem to fit together, and then he kind of pulls these different threads together. And I don't think Beauman's an author that everybody's going to like, but he's an author that is one of the few authors that can actually make me laugh out loud. I certainly did when I was reading The Teleportation Accident, and I'm hoping he may have honed his craft slightly to give this the extra half a star that The Teleportation Accident was lacking, and push it to a 5-star read. It's typical kind of Ned Beauman setup. It has this kind of anarchic kind of sounding storyline about these two separate expeditions that set off into the Honduras jungle at the same time, both in search of this Mayan temple in the late 1930s. One is going there to shoot a kind of screwball comedy, and the other is going there to disassemble the Mayan temple and ship it back to the United States. And there's kind of conflicts between the two expeditions, and it then rolls the storyline forward to the modern day, and there's a kind of CIA plot in this same area of jungle. And this feels exactly like The Teleportation Accident, in the sense that it had all these, as I say, disparate kind of bizarre storylines that are kind of pulled together in a kind of romp with a kind of wit and humour. And I'm just really looking forward to picking this one up, and hoping, as I say, that Beauman has just pushed it that little bit harder in this book to get that extra half a star that I didn't give to The Teleportation Accident. So that, I guess, is very much based on my previous experience of that author. I've not seen anybody mention this on BookTube so far. So the final fiction read, rather, that I've decided to give or predict as a 5-star read, I had two, and I was looking specifically for a science fiction and fantasy read to add to my list, and I had two books. The first one that didn't quite make the cut was this one, which is Autonomous by AnnLee Newitz. I saw this got a is it Thomas over at SFF 180? Well, he did a review of this, gave it 4 stars, and it sounded really interesting, but it didn't quite make the cut. The one that I actually went for, although it covers some of the same ground or some of the same themes, is The Punch Escrow by Tal M. Klein. I tend to like sci-fis that deal with extrapolations of modern day issues, and I think that's what this is going to do in terms of the issue of corporate ownership of technology and of platforms that we have now with the likes of Google and Facebook, because this is about a future where nanotechnology has become prevalent, and although it has solved many of the issues that we have today, like pollution, it is still controlled and managed by these big corporations. And the story is about a kind of everyday guy who works with artificial intelligence, and one day he's going through this teleportation device, which has become, I think, fairly commonplace, and he finds that he ends up getting duplicated. And consequences of that is he starts to become hunted by these corporations. So he finds himself, sounds a bit like North by Northwest, I think it is, that film with Gregory Peck, where a sort of everyman becomes chased by forces unknown. And I'm hoping this is going to be a kind of action-packed page-turner with, as I say, some thought about corporate control of technology. So that's my final fiction book. A couple of non-fiction picks I'm going to do very quickly here, because I'm conscious of the time's already running on for this video. The first one I've already mentioned in my non-fiction November video, so go and watch that if you haven't already seen this. So I'll just summarise here. It's The Killers of the Flower Moon by David Grann, and it is based on a round historical fact. It is about 1920s Oklahoma, and it is about the murders of several people in the Osage Indian reservation. And it is about the early FBI and their investigations of these murders, and the uncovering of a conspiracy that is all about the oil that sits under the Osage Indian reservation. So it's got rave reviews. I suppose I'm influenced on this by the fact that the likes of Steve Donoghue have given this a great review. So it has been influenced to a large degree by the people on BookTube. In fact, I wouldn't have picked this up. I wouldn't have known about it if it hadn't been for BookTube. And finally, for those of you that have seen my BookTube newbie tag video, you will know that I'm a big fan of nature writing, and to my eternal shame, and I mentioned this one in my non-fiction November TBR video as well, I've never got round to H is for Hawk by Helen McDonald. I am reading, as part of non-fiction November, the kind of spiritual father of this novel, the big influence on this novel, which is T.H. White's Goshawk. But for those of you that don't know, this H is for Hawk is about Ellen McDonald, and to deal with the death of her father, she decides, rather bizarrely, to train a northern goshawk. The northern goshawk being famously, in falconry circles, one of the most difficult birds to train, and it's about how she goes through that process and how that process helps her to deal with the death of her father. So those are the two non-fiction picks. That is it for this video. Have any of you out there read any of these books? Do you agree with me that these are likely to be 5-star reads? If you do or do not, please feel free to comment. What are your own 5-star reads? If you go and look at your TBR, what do you think would be your own 5-star reads? Let me know again in the comments. Other than that, I hope you're enjoying your weekend, enjoying your books, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye.